All right. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Mason Becker. Thanks for tuning in here, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube or wherever else. This is a first of a series of virtual town halls that I'm going to be participating in this month with some of our area Democratic county parties here in the 33rd Assembly District. And I want to introduce a good friend of mine. He is the chair of the Jeff Dems, and I'm going to talk him up a little bit because he and his board and his leadership team have just done a great job over the past couple of years, really re-energizing the Democratic Party of Jefferson County. And they have some really exciting things in store this year. So, Steve, if you could introduce yourself and talk about what the Jeff Dems have going on.
Well, thank you very much, Mason. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, I've been the chair of the Jeff Dems for over a year, about a year and a half now. And we have been doing some incredible work as far as social media is concerned. We were very fortunate and got some donations. And we have a Facebook presence, Twitter. Also, many of you have probably seen ads in the Daily Union. They're issue ads, and we post them every 2 weeks. And then we run Facebook ads as well that are in sync with that. And then there's a billboard that we have on Highway 26 going into Watertown. Also, I through quite a bit of asking and needling people, there were finally found some landowners on the interstate on I-94. So what we have are 2 spots on the interstate between basically Lake Mills and Oconomowoc. And I don't know, some of you that are about my age may remember the Burma Shave signs, where there was a sign and then there was another sign and then another one, and it spelled something out. Well, we're doing that going eastbound and also westbound. And we're going to be changing those every 2 weeks. Right now, it's on the eastbound lane, it says Black Lives Matter. And on the westbound lane, it says, thank you, truckers and healthcare workers. But we're going to continue this, supporting our candidates, continuing the social media push right through November. And we are so pleased to have Mason Becker on our team. So, Mason, it's good to work with you.
Absolutely. It's good to work with you and your entire team. And it's just exciting because I really think change is in the air this year. But what I want to do right now, we've actually got a decent amount of viewers already. This is great. And some of you probably do know me, your friends, family. Maybe you've worked with me. Maybe you know me through my service on the Fort Atkinson City Council. But I want to kind of give a background about who I am and how I got here today. So it's pretty obvious, I'm from Fort Atkinson. I grew up here, lived here pretty much my entire life. My dad, when I was a young kid growing up, worked for the Jones Dairy Farm. He was involved with the UFCW there. Later went to work for the EFL-CIO. My mom was actually a part-time church secretary at our church, Bethany Lutheran. And growing up, this was a great place to live, great place to grow up, great schools, great parks, great everything. I attended UW-Whitewater, graduated there in 2002 with a degree in speech communications. That's where I met my lovely wife, Laura. We actually lived in Whitewater for the first 3 years we were married there. She had a job at the university. And then when that time kind of ended, we looked around and decided to put down roots in Fort Atkinson, my hometown. Since that time, we've been able to raise a family. We have 2 young sons, Alexander and Cyrus. I think they are upstairs with Laura watching right now. So, hey, boys, hope you're having fun. And, background is, I did a couple different jobs after college. And then in 2006, dipped my toe into the water of being a small family business owner. Had one business that ran for about 11 years. And about 5 years ago, I joined my family's other business. They're in the restaurant business, as many people know. I officially became a Subway franchisee. You can see my my plaque on the wall back there about 5 years ago. And being a small business owner, you know, it's an eye opener every day. There's always new challenges, and I think it's not even doing it justice that right now small businesses are facing more challenges than ever with COVID-19 and the changes we had with the Safer at Home order when that was in place, and then the confusion that happened after the state Supreme Court abruptly lifted the Safer at Home order. And we could talk about that more later on. But basically, how did I end up here today and running for state assembly? 5 years ago, I was asked to do something I'd never done before, and that was run for a local office. At the time, the Fort Atkinson City Council was made up of really good people, but our council had kind of developed a reputation of not always addressing important issues quickly, and sometimes it took too long for them to make basic decisions. So I thought I could take my background being a family man and a small business owner and maybe bring a new perspective. So spring of 2015, I ran for city council for the first time. I was one of 4 people running, and I ended up being the top vote earner. And I'm proud and humbled to say that in both of my 2 re-election runs since then, I've been the top vote earner in both of those elections too. Recently this spring, I was elected by my peers Fort Atkinson City Council president. It's actually my 3rd overall year serving in that role. So that's really humbling and a deep honor. And serving in local government, I really believe that that is the model for how government at all levels should work, okay? We don't worry about, you know, who's a Democrat or who's a Republican, what your background is, what your so-called ideology is. We have our discussions, and sometimes there are heated disagreements, but at the end of the day, we build consensus and we try to make the best decisions for all of our local residents. And I can only look at Madison and what's been going on there the last few years, and I just kind of have to shake my head. You know, we have too much hyper-partisanship, not enough cooperation, and you have the special interests and their politics being put over the needs of the people. And I think the more of you that I speak to and talk about this, the more of you are fed up as well, because you know that government, it's not even setting a good example for our kids, and it's not setting a good example for our future. Just a couple quick examples for you. It's been no surprise the last few years in our state that our infrastructure has been crumbling. 4 years ago, our city council realized that the state government wasn't going to be stepping up to help. Our designated legislators in Madison, they would listen to us and they would nod their heads, and they would say, yes, we know road maintenance is a problem, but they didn't really do anything to fix the situation. So we passed a wheel tax, a $20 per vehicle per year wheel tax. We weren't excited to do it, but we know it had to be done. And since that time, we've been able to fix our streets in Fort Atkinson, get them back up to where they should have been. I think that's an example of how the state government all too often lately is kicking problems back down to the local level. They've done it with roads. They've done it with education by requiring communities to go to public referendum over and over again just to fund their basic needs. And they've done it very recently with the coronavirus pandemic. They had the state Supreme Court make a ruling, and then rather than coming together with the governor and hashing out some new guidelines, they just said, hey, local governments, it's on you guys, do whatever you want. And so now we have a patchwork of different regulations and guidelines in different areas. And that's just not how government should work. Government should be about coming together and building consensus and making the tough decisions when you have to because, hey, they're getting full-time salary, full-time benefits. They should be working to earn that salary. One other thing that we'll probably touch on later is taxes. This might surprise people to hear coming from somebody running as a Democrat and somebody who's president of a local city council, but I strongly feel that, yes, our property taxes are too high. We've had people from Illinois email our city manager thinking about moving to the Fort Atkinson area, and they go, wow, in Wisconsin, your property taxes are high. If people from Illinois are complaining about our high taxes, that tells me we maybe have a marketability problem on our hands. So I see Wisconsin as a state begging for comprehensive tax reform. We rely way more on the property tax than most other states throughout the entire country. We should be diversifying our revenues, and we should be listening to our residents when they're telling us that, you know, hey, I might have to sell and downsize because I can't afford my property tax payments anymore. Maybe it's that retired person or, you know, whatever. But we need to really do more than just complain about taxes. We actually need to roll up our sleeves and get to work to do something about them. Before I wrap things up here, I'd be really remiss if I didn't at least quickly touch on the events of the past week or so across our country. I'm sure we might get some questions on that, and I will cover it more later. But you know, yes, nobody wants to see looting, nobody wants to see graffiti or vandalism, but we really need to get past this acceptance that, you know, Black men can get killed by a police officer on video, and we're just going to kind of collectively shrug as a country. I really think that Vice President Joe Biden said it best earlier this past week when he said that, you know, George Floyd is not going to become another hashtag. When, you know, somebody dies on camera like that with other people begging for the police officer to stop, that's not something we can allow to go unchecked any longer in this country. So, like I said, we'll probably talk more about it later. But I know you guys are scared and worried with what's going on across the country with what we're seeing, but I'm right there with you, and I am going to stand by our communities of color that have been facing this crisis for way too long. So just to wrap things up before we start going into questions and everything, you know, Wisconsin has been known as a great place to grow up, to start a business, to raise a family. And we've been losing too much of that over the past 10 years. You know, I'm tired of seeing talent leaving the state. I'm tired of, you know, the state government having to resort to putting ads targeted to millennials living in Chicago. That's a gimmick they've tried. It doesn't work. I'm sorry. And we need to make Wisconsin a great state to live, work, and play. And it's going to take more than marketing slogans about being open for business. We need to get back to the business of government, and that's the biggest reason why I'm running. I'm tired of our state government not working. I'm tired of having local legislators who don't listen to us. And I'm just hoping that November, with your help, we can return to results. So, guys, I want to kind of open it up for questions here. Feel free to add those in your chat boxes on Facebook and YouTube as well. Steve, while we're waiting for that, do you have anything to add or just anything you'd like to touch on quickly?
Well, just that, you know, I think you said it. We've got two crises going on in this state, and then also in the, you know, in the country. We've got the coronavirus, and boy, oh boy, I'm afraid we're not taking it as seriously as possible. And then the whole thing with George Floyd and the murder and the, you know, the upwelling of anger. We have to reevaluate that, and those two items are front and center. And thank you very much, Mason, for saying something about that. I would just like to remind everybody that this is a town hall, and this is a moment when everybody should, use the chat box to ask Mason some questions. And Mason, I do have one question that I'd like to just kick things off, and then we'll see, what everybody else is talking about. But as you know, Wisconsin is probably the most gerrymandered state in the country. And it is incredibly frustrating to sit back and just, not have your voice heard. So what do you think, what is your take on gerrymandering, and what do you plan on doing when you get to the Capitol?
Yeah, gerrymandering is real. Some people might laugh about it and say, well, you just got to get better and win more elections. But the truth of it is, and I think everybody agrees because it's just common sense, the people should be picking their representatives. It shouldn't be politicians picking their voters. And I think the vast majority of Wisconsinites agree with that. We've seen, I think it's close to 2/3 of all Wisconsin counties have either by county board resolution or public referendum passed resolutions saying that they want fair maps and redistricting done in a fair way. It's going to be very tough. And, if people aren't willing to roll up their sleeves and get behind a candidate like me, if Robin Vos and the Republican Party are able to gain 3 more seats in the state legislature, they will have a veto-proof majority, which means that even if they draw up maps that Governor Evers vetoes with his veto pen, they can override that veto ruling, and then we'll be stuck with 10 more years of rigged maps, which mean our legislators really don't have to listen. They don't have to be accountable to the people. They can just listen to their lobbyists and vote in lockstep with their party leadership. One thing I'm really heartened by is that recently Governor Evers created his own nonpartisan redistricting commission. Now, it's not an official body. It's not like a legal entity that has legal weight. But what they will be able to do at the same time the Republicans are drawing up their idea of a new rigged map, this People's Maps Commission will be able to design a fair map that makes sense and be able to hold it up and show the contrast between what the majority party is doing. That really hardens me. One thing to really keep an eye on, it just came out today. Scott Jensen, who's a very active conservative lobbyist in Madison, and a group called WILL, the Wisconsin Institute of Law and Liberty, brought a lawsuit that basically said if the maps end up in court, it's going to be the state Supreme Court and not a federal court ruling on it. As of right now, it would go before a federal court. So they're already trying to start a preemptive legal battle because I think they know where public sentiment is. And so we really need to get our state government to push back however possibly we can. And more than anything, we just got to make sure we win some seats, including the 33rd Assembly District this November. So we've gotten some questions, and I really appreciate them. Somebody asked, Mason, how can we address school funding and the uncertainty related to funding because of the coronavirus? That's a tough one right now. We don't even know necessarily what school is going to look like in our area this fall. We're seeing districts that are drawing up plans where maybe they'll only go certain days of the week. Maybe they'll rotate in groups, like some kids come one day and other kids come the next. School funding is going to be very tough. And at the end of the day, I think the long-term solution is we have to break out of this referendum cycle where, it used to be the expectation was communities would only go to a public school referendum if they had like a very major expenditure that they had to pay for, like say a new building or a major renovation, new equipment, that kind of thing. Now communities have to go to public referendum every 2 to 3 years just to maintain the same educational services they're already trying to offer to their students. So we need to get past that. And at the end of the day, we can see what's happening in Madison. One party has kind of thrown their hands up in the air. They're really not trying to work to defend public education, and the other party is. So when people go to the polls in November, they're going to have to keep that in the back of their minds. Steve, what else do we have?
Well, there are a couple more questions that are coming up. Maybe you may have answered this already, but when you're elected, what would be the first piece of legislation that you would like to sign on to?
Beyond the obvious one of fair maps, and there are laws out there, or I should say not laws, but bills that have been proposed to create a nonpartisan redistricting commission. The priorities are the same. I would love to adjust healthcare in this state. How scary is it right now with the coronavirus pandemic still raging, and it is, in spite of what the state Supreme Court ruled, and businesses opening back up, which I know they have to, and they had to get to that point. But how scary is it that some of our neighbors might not go to a doctor right away if they're experiencing symptoms because they're worried about that copay or that deductible that they have? Maybe they're not fortunate enough to get quality health insurance through an employer. My wife and myself, for 3 years, we had to buy our insurance on the marketplace through the Affordable Care Act. And every year, the deductibles got higher and higher. The copays got higher. And it's just not sustainable. So I would love to do things to address healthcare. There's other issues like infrastructure and things like that, but I would say fair maps and healthcare, in terms of things that I think we could get movement on right away, I think those two are right at the top of the list.
Great, Mason, great answers there. Just a reminder. I'm sorry. Let me just interject some. Just a reminder. There's going to be on the ballot in November. People will be able to cast a ballot for, it's a non-binding resolution to put fair maps forward. So that's going to be on the November the November election, along with everything else. So Mason, it's hard to predict what might be happening with the pandemic at this point in time. And if there is a second wave, I mean, we had quite a little show over Memorial Day weekend where everybody was getting together, not only in Wisconsin, but around the country. And, that social distancing was sort of ignored. Everybody understands that it's a 2-week incubation period. And so we may be seeing something coming around here in about a week to 10 days. So what do you think we should do with trying to open businesses, trying to keep the economy going, yet keeping people safe? I mean, what is your take on all of that?
My take is we had a plan to gradually open up businesses and keep people safe, and it was the safer at home order. We were seeing it was working. It was keeping the incidences of new cases low. It was a unified statewide plan to address a statewide issue because, as we started to see, it wasn't just Milwaukee and Dane County getting hit. Areas like Brown County were getting hit as well. And then we were gradually reopening businesses. I personally thought they could have done things like open golf courses and maybe some of the little more personal businesses like pet grooming and stuff a little sooner than they did. But we were getting there. And the whole thing with ending the safer at home order, it just threw the whole state into chaos. My family and I, we own 13 restaurant locations. Most are in Jefferson County, but a few of them aren't. And it was very confusing because we have one store in Dane County, which decided to just extend the safer at home order on their own. And then several stores in like Jefferson County where they just kind of passed some basic guidelines. basic recommendations for businesses to follow. So it was very confusing, and it cast the whole state into chaos. One thing that I am heartened by during the whole coronavirus pandemic, I should say, it has started a conversation about the public health. And it's made people realize that we don't live in an economy. We live in an actual society made up of neighbors, just like you and me, and local communities. People travel back and forth. Here in Jefferson County, a lot of people commute to work to and from Madison, Milwaukee, Waukesha. So this idea you can just isolate certain areas has never held with me. And I just hope we do what we can. We're starting to see in some parts of the state the coronavirus incidences creep back up a little bit. I just read, for example, the other day, Portage County has seen like an 85% increase in cases over the past 2 weeks. And we're seeing some similar trends in other areas. I just hope people are still using common sense, trying to exercise at least some social distancing. I'm still wearing a mask out when I'm out in public. I know not everybody is, but if we can all do those little things we can, I think we'll get through this okay, in spite of what our state government has done. There was one that popped up that I really.
There's another question here.
Go ahead.
Oh, well, a little delay there. As far as the gerrymandering, what can Democrats do? As far as the county party is concerned, we're really looking at the issues and getting the issues out there and making sure that through our social media, through our print ads, through every means possible at this point in time, that people understand what the issues are, what's important. And what's important are, like you mentioned, fair maps, public schools, also, safe environment, making sure that we have clean air and clean water to enjoy, get into our lakes, we can go fishing. All of those things are really critical. And one party is clearly in favor of that. And Mason, I'm glad I'm on your side.
I'm glad to be on your side too right now, Steve. I think the contrasts have never been clearer. And personally, with seeing and I'm not trying to make this election about President Trump, but it is the overarching theme of this election cycle. We've seen how President Trump has addressed the issues over the last few weeks, and we've seen the rhetoric. And now we saw this horrifying display that I personally think was blasphemous. It was anti-Christian. It was anti-American, where they used officers to, whether it was tear gas or something else. I really am not. I'm not concerned about the semantics. They basically gassed these people, used rubber bullets to clear them out. And then, for him to stand up there looking like he had never held a Bible before in his life, frankly, and then to make that kind of display, I just think really illustrates what's at stake in our country right now. One party has gone lockstep with it. There's been barely anyone in the last 48 hours who has spoken out against President Trump from the Republican Party. And they have never done anything to hold him accountable. So that I want to get back though to Wisconsin and what we can do this year to win this November. We're organized. Certainly coronavirus has changed our plans a bit. This is definitely a different campaign than what I had envisioned when we launched back in January. Digital organizing is critical right now. Things like we're doing right now here, doing a virtual town hall like this on Facebook Live and YouTube. That's how we're going to keep getting our message out until COVID abates enough that we can do things like, Steve, you can have your local meetings again, and we can do bigger in-person events and things like that. The other thing that I'm going to ask people to do, I'm gonna slip my own banner up here right now, but it's unfortunate, but it's the reality. It takes money to win elections. Okay. I'm very fortunate that people have been supportive of our campaign so far, but we needed to keep going if we're going to keep getting our message out through November. So I hope if you agree with what I'm saying and agree with my message and agree that we need a change and we need to get back to results in Madison, that you'll consider contributing, especially if you haven't already. Earlier, I had the banner up for the Jeff Dems. If you consider signing up for a membership with the Democratic Party of Jefferson County, or at least just making a contribution, that will allow them to keep doing things like putting up billboards and taking out ads in local papers to get their message out. Because at the end of the day, it's about reaching the voters. And one thing I'll say in conclusion, I don't want to go on about this all evening, although Steve, you and I, we could probably talk all night about this. We as Democrats, we have tended to have a habit of, we think that being involved in an election is showing up at the ballot box and voting, and maybe you tell a friend you're voting. We can't win with that kind of attitude anymore. And I think 2016 was really a deep illustration that strategy doesn't work. We need to become involved. When we're able to, we need to knock doors. We need to put out more signage, more lit. We need to spread our message on the internet, because we've seen the other side is not going to stop. They're going to keep putting out their message. They're going to keep using the airwaves as much as they can. They will accept foreign interference if it comes. So we need to counter that by hopefully giving and spreading our message. So I know I went on for a while with that, Steve, but it got me going.
Oh, that's quite all right. But let me just interject something. The 33rd is a gerrymandered district. I mean, it truly is. And the maps have been drawn so that the Democratic voters, the leaning Republican voters that would come our way, the independent voters, we're all going to have to get out there and cast a ballot in November. And I remember listening to Matt Rothschild talk about, at one of the meetings, and he said, look, the Republicans have more money than God. And it was like, oh my word, yes. But the fact of the matter is, elections do need financial support. They do. It's that simple. When we take ads out in the Daily Union, when we have people developing our Facebook ads, it costs money. The people that do those developments, the people that do that artwork, we pay them. We pay them to present us in a professional manner. There's a billboard, as I mentioned. We've got another billboard coming up. The hand-painted signs, I go to the hardware store and purchase all kinds of materials so that we can do those hand-painted signs. Not hopefully, there will be yard signs popping up all over the place for Mason and all the other candidates, and Tom Paulzowitz and Melissa Winker throughout Jefferson County. And we need to get behind these candidates. And Mason hit it right on the head. He said, look, funding specifically to Mason matters. It really does. If you're in Melissa Winker's district, then go to her website, or Abby Lowry, or Don Verwink. Support these candidates where it matters. And the Jeff Dems, we are going to continue to do all of our, as I said before, all of our social media and print ads right through November. And we need your support. It's that simple. And you can go on our website, you can go on Mason's website, and you can lend your support to us so that we do win and that we do flip the 33rd Assembly District for Mason. I want to see that guy in the Capitol. I want to go down there and visit him in his office.
Absolutely. I want to make that happen. And just one more thing I'll say really quick. You mentioned, the 33rd Assembly District. It is a gerrymandered district. Nobody's taking that for granted. It's split between three counties: Jefferson County, Walworth County, and Waukesha County. But what I want to tell people, if you think you're on the fence, you're not sure if I can win, I have a very talented kitchen cabinet. It's made up of people from throughout the 33rd Assembly District. So it's not just like my friends from Fort Atkinson and Jefferson helping me. It's people from all over the district. We've got my very talented campaign manager, Nora, who's helping us out here this evening. She's a digital guru, and she's stretching every dollar right now digitally so we can get our message out, because we can't knock doors and things because of COVID. So, I've had people say, "Hey, Mason, you're taking one for the team. Good job." And no, we have a plan to win. We know exactly how many votes we need total. And I know exactly how many votes I need to get in each ward. And we're rolling up our sleeves and we're doing the hard work to make sure we get to that vote total in November. Steve, I want to jump in because I really want to make sure that we do address this question. It was asked, with the endless stream of what seems to be unchecked police overreach and brutality, what legislation or actions do you plan on proposing to help curb these actions in our state and our communities? And, this is obviously top on everybody's mind right now. I do firmly believe most police officers are good people. They're good men and women. They serve their communities. They're doing it for the right reasons. But then we look at what happened to Mr. Floyd in Minnesota. And then during the demonstrations, we saw just horrible images, officers in full riot gear knocking over an old man with a cane who was just standing on the street, not even getting in their way. We saw a young woman sitting on the ground and get kicked in the head. I mean, that is not what America should look like at any point. Yes, we want to be tough on crime, but we shouldn't be crushing free speech like that. We shouldn't be crushing peaceful demonstrators. As far as what Governor Evers has proposed, yes, I do support it. I do want to say all police departments in Wisconsin are required by state law to have a use of force policy already in place. And I think for the most part, most of our police departments do a good job following those. But I think the events of the last few weeks have shown that we need to strengthen those, and we should have a public review and a public discussion of what those use of force policies look like. And I think that, yes, the state government should address this problem. The unfortunate thing is we already know that Robin Vos isn't willing to bring the legislature back into session. And as we've seen time and time and again, even if Governor Evers tries to call a special session, they'll probably just gavel in and out of it. And I think we should expect better of our state government. We should expect better for the money we're paying them. And we should expect better for the safety and well-being of our communities. So that's what I have to say there. What do we have next, Steve?
Very good. Thank you, Mason. Well, there was a question about internet. Holy Toledo. I mean, I live in rural Lake Mills, and I've been having some trouble with the internet. And if we're going to move into the 21st century, everybody should have access to internet. I don't know how many kids really were behind the 8 ball because they couldn't go to school and they didn't have access to internet, and it's just a shame. So what do you think, what can we do for the internet infrastructure? I mean, it should be like any other public utility, like water and electricity. At this point in time, we're fooling ourselves if we don't think it's got to be part of every household's, utility. So what do you think? I mean, what can we do to move that forward, to push that need?
We do need to treat it as if it's a utility. It's the 21st century. Everyone needs access to quality internet. no offense, Steve, but looking at your image in this live stream, it's it's not the most flattering, and you know, it's you're a handsome enough guy. It should be doing you you know, it should be doing you better justice than that. And you know, I talk to people from all over the state. My in-laws, for example, live way up north, up in Langlade County, and I'm sorry, Spectrum or whoever else, Comcast, they're never going to come in and lay any kind of internet cable in some of these rural areas. It's just not financially feasible for them. And while I don't blame those companies for taking that stance, it doesn't cut it anymore in the 21st century. We saw during Safer at Home how important having decent, reliable internet is for families. So their kids can still do their schoolwork at home. They can engage in group lessons with their teachers. And people like my wife, who had to switch to working from home full time, still need to be able to do their job properly and still be able to do things like Zoom chats and things like that. So we absolutely need the state government to address this in some fashion. I would treat it as like, you know, it would do for Wisconsin what rural electrification did for rural parts of the country in the 1920s and 30s. It brought the, you know, lighting and modern, you know, conveniences that those areas were never going to get otherwise. You weren't going to get private companies putting in electrical wires on their own, at least in any organized fashion. And so what rural electrification did for America in the past, I think statewide broadband, especially in our rural areas, that can be a huge update. One thing I want to touch on quick, circling back to my last question, I wanted to clear something up. I said Governor Evers had proposed a bill to increase use of force regulations or guidelines for police departments. He supports it. So I'm saying I support that same proposal right now that's been put forth in the legislature. Steve, what should we touch on next?
Well, I would like to know how, you know, it really comes together with the whole gerrymandering thing and that sort of thing. But what do you think you could do to reach across the aisle so that there is a dialogue with moderate thinking Republicans? It's hard because Senator, they never return my phone calls. They never reach out to me. They never have any dialogue. Do you plan on doing stuff like that, for instance?
I'm going to reach out and talk to as many people as I can. You know, like I talked about with our city council, you know, I've had the honor of working with, you know, it's always a body of 5 people, and it's changed over the years. And, you know, we've had people of different backgrounds and ideological viewpoints, but we get together and we talk, and we can always come to some kind of compromise agreement. I've frankly, and maybe none of them will admit this on camera or on record, but I've heard secondhand that a lot of the rank and file Republicans are actually frustrated, because I really think that even while I may disagree with a lot of their viewpoints, most people run for office because they genuinely do want to make a difference. They want to get things done. They don't just want to sit back and be told how to vote. They want to bring something back to their communities that they can be proud of and say, hey, you folks told me this was a huge problem. I went to Madison, I worked for you guys, I reached across the aisle, and I got something done. I really believe that there are people of all political stripes in Madison who want to get over this hyper-partisan us versus them situation. You know, I think it's just sad that I've heard that people like my opponent, they don't even get the courtesy sometimes of a phone call telling them how to vote. They get a text message telling them, hey, you're voting this way on this bill later today. And I'm not going to go to Madison and do that. I can't think of anything more depressing than running and winning an election and then just sitting around waiting to be texted how to vote. That's not my style. People in Fort Atkinson know that I can be outspoken when I need to be. I can be argumentative when I need to be. But I really think that there's going to be areas where I saw the question popping up, and we'll get to it, but at least medical marijuana, some of their members actually had a bill proposed to legalize medicinal marijuana, and their leadership wouldn't even let them bring it up for a vote. There's areas like that where there is consensus. We can come together. So I'm hoping that after this November's election, there's going to kind of be a thawing, and there'll be a recognition that Wisconsin can't continue down the same path it was going. We need to talk to each other, and we need to get back to results for our state residents.
Very good. Mason, another question came up. Fort Atkinson, and this is true for some other communities as well. They have a lot to offer, Fort Atkinson and Jefferson and Lake Mills and the rest of them, but Fort for sure. But rents are high and few homes are on the market. What can we do to ensure our communities welcome and keep talent?
That's a tremendous question. During my time on the Fort Atkinson City Council, I have come to recognize the dearth of housing options for residents to be one of our most pressing needs. I think it's sad that I've literally been told, like, hey, this hotel across the street, there's a bus that pulls up every day, Monday through Friday, and kids get on it because there's actually families living in that hotel because they don't have anywhere else to go. They can't find an apartment to rent. There's people who've told me if I can't find a place to rent by next week, I'm going to be living with my kids in my car. We need to figure out ways to get our communities building more multifamily housing. And I'm primarily talking about apartment buildings. And I'm not talking about just low income. They can be mixed income. We should be encouraging even some high income multifamily housing creation, because there are a lot of seniors who would like to downsize. But right now, in many parts of the state, including in the 33rd Assembly District, that new construction is not happening anywhere to a degree it should be. We need to find ways to cut costs for construction companies. I'm not saying they should cut corners or that we need to deregulate everything, but right now, many developers require a mix of incentives from both the state, for example, WIDA, and then also local incentives from the local governments. And while that might be okay in the short term, long term, we need to come up with better ideas, and we need to allow different types of housing that maybe we haven't in the past. I know some people in Fort have been advocating for tiny houses, and if you can find a developer who can make that work, great. If you can, we should just be allowing a lot more types of housing in general. So absolutely, it's a statewide issue, though. You go to any part of the state and it's a problem. And I think it's one of the best ways that we can help people is just making sure that they can get that roof over their head so they can put down roots in their community. Steve, I think
going along with that, I mean, if we had high-speed internet, then that talent would have someplace to go. So, yeah.
Yep. If you want those,
I'm sorry, Mason, you were going to say something else.
Yeah, no, you hit on a great point with the internet. The internet ties into it too. If you want that 21st century talent and you want to attract new businesses, you better make sure that broadband internet is available in your area at a reasonable cost. So one question that came up for you, Steve, and I think this is a really good one. How has the county party grown since 2016?
Well, I think the county party, we've done a lot. The growth particularly has been in a lot more social media. We're really out there arguing for our shared policies and the things that are really important to us like, like I was going to ask you a question, and we'll get to this a little bit later on, like supporting our farmers, making sure that we have clean air and clean water, supporting public schools, making sure that workers are supported. I mean, all of those things are really critical. And I think over the last, well, since I've become chair, things have really moved forward as far as more social media. It's interesting to kind of wrap your head around this whole safer at home concept that we're all going to be forced to continue with for who knows how long. And the Jeff Dems, we've gone to virtual meetings. We're bringing in speakers. We've got a really cool June, everybody's going to be seeing this, really cool June member meeting, quote unquote member meeting coming up. And so everybody will be hearing more about that. But I think the Democrats in Jefferson County are really getting on board with being more and more capable, more and more willing to help, because we need people like you in office. And so, it's going to continue to grow. I mean, we're going to continue to do those sorts of things, not only here in 2020, but we're looking at 2021, 2022, and how we can move the dial even further.
Yeah, I think there's really been, from my perspective, and as somebody who's been participating for the last 5-6 years, I think there's been a sea change in the energy, and really 2016 was just a wake-up call that, it doesn't cut it, like I said earlier, to just show up and vote on election day. It doesn't cut it just to sit on your Facebook page and post your opinions and just kind of preach to the choir. There has to be outreach, whether it's knocking doors or phone calls. You can text people now about whether they're planning to vote, how they're going to vote. And there's just been, as bad as 2016 was for a lot of us, it really woke people up and re-energized people and showed them, like, this is real. We know what's at stake now. And if we don't all get together and make something happen, it's not going to be good for the next generation or two. One question I wanted to make sure I hit on, because I saw it pop up a couple different people. Mason, would you support giving more power back to municipalities and school districts? Absolutely, I would. Absolutely. I know some people say it's an old cliche, but I really think government works best when it's held most closely to the people. Local residents know what's best for their communities. What works in Fort Atkinson isn't necessarily going to work in Madison, and what works in Madison isn't going to work in Superior, for example. Local control over the last decade plus has badly eroded in Wisconsin. And it's not just because of gerrymandering. It's because the state government has authored and passed a myriad number of laws that have downgraded local control. Things about how schools can operate, things about what fees cities can levy, to cover their expenses. And by the way, I don't want people to be paying fees up to their eyeballs, but what works in one community doesn't work for the other. And, Wisconsin was founded as, kind of a great, experimentation of democracy. It became kind of a test lab for democracy. And the way I've seen it, local communities should be able to try new things. If somebody has an idea that local residents like and that people can get behind, they shouldn't be prohibited by the state government. Some legislator in Madison shouldn't be able to tell a community up north how they can regulate their lakes and beaches and things like that. So we need to get back to that. We need to take back government. And absolutely, when I get to Madison, I'm going to do what I can to restore back as much local control as I possibly can.
Mason, I've got a question changing the direction just a little bit about the environment and also clean water, clean air, making sure that the DNR is funded. I mean, what's your take on all of that?
My take on that, especially with DNR funding, is Wisconsin is a state with a great natural heritage. Our lakes, our parks, our rivers. I don't want to lose that. I want to make sure that when I'm dead and gone someday, that my kids and my grandkids are going to be able to enjoy our state parks and our outdoor recreational opportunities, just like they can today. The DNR needs to be properly funded, and it doesn't need to be micromanaged by the state legislature. We need professionals at the DNR to be able to use facts and science to make the best decisions about managing our natural resources. In terms of water, I don't want to end up like some states where, for example, there's parts of Kansas where they let high capacity wells run wild for too long, and now many rural residents can't get drinking water, whether safe or otherwise. They just can't get it. They have to get bottled water because their water table has dried up. So it's not just about valuing the outdoors. It's making sure that we're managing our natural resources so that everybody can use them. Everybody has a right to clean drinking water. Everybody has the right to clean, breathable air. So yes, absolutely. I think the DNR should be properly funded, and they should be run by professionals and not politicians.
Okay. What about clean energy? A lot of businesses are thinking in terms of, using clean energy to run their businesses. Iowa, for instance, is pumping a lot of money into wind. Other states are doing that and getting back to the local control. I know that the state legislature has really hamstrung local communities so that, the placement of wind turbines and that sort of thing. So where do you think Wisconsin should go for the whole clean energy initiative in the 21st century?
Clean energy is our future. We kind of had a local flap recently. MATC is taking down, or they just took down wind turbine that had broken down and it was I guess too expensive to repair. But I see that as, they did an experiment, and for a number of years it did provide energy, and it also provided educational opportunities at their school. Like I said, clean energy is the future. One thing I'm proud of is that the city of Fort Atkinson, during my time while I've been serving on the city council, we've dipped our toe a little bit more into the pond of clean energy. We, in the last year or two, put solar panels on one of our city-owned buildings, and that technology is starting to become more affordable. I think it's unfortunate that the federal government has lately attacked some of those clean energy initiatives. They scaled back some of the subsidies and tax credits that were available, because every president since at least Jimmy Carter has said that we need to get off the addiction of foreign oil. That needs to be about more than just talk. We need to actually let people have options, whether that's solar, whether that's wind energy. And it's about preserving, again, our state environment. What do we want to leave for our kids and our grandkids? So, we need to do a lot more. And I think frankly, government can set the example. They can set the example. They can figure out, they can do experiments. They can try new things. And then if they make sense and they're economically feasible, then hopefully private business gets on board.
Yeah, good. Jefferson County is a pretty rural county, and we've got a lot of dairy farms. We've got a lot of farmers. It's a big issue supporting our farms, supporting our farmers, and making sure that, our small farms remain intact. but then on the other hand, when things expand and you've got the big CAFOs, then you've got manure issues, and that is a problem for a lot of rural people, and it impacts their water and getting back to the whole water and streams and lakes and that sort of thing. So what's the balance with farming and our rural agriculture and safety, and then the water quality?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first thing is we need to make sure that our smaller family farmers have a future in this state. We've seen over the last 5 years that family farms are closing at a horrific rate, and we need to do more than just try to do things like a gimmick where we do a milk drinking challenge or things like that, which I've seen politicians try to do. We need to work with them. And while I still think that this is a dairy state, and I think we're still going to have that brand for a long time, if it makes sense in certain situations, we need to help at least some of those dairy farmers be able to transition to new opportunities, new crops, new products, whatever it is. At one point over 100 years ago, Fort Atkinson sent a governor to Madison. And one of the things that W.D. Hoard did was he helped Wisconsin transition from a wheat-based agrarian economy to a dairy economy. And it paid off for over 100 years in this state. Now, I think we can still help those dairy farmers, but if there's opportunities to diversify markets in ways that make sense, the state government needs to go about the business of helping make those opportunities happen. As far as the other part of the question, Steve, managing runoff and pollution and things like that, I firmly believe that small farmers do a much better job of managing those issues than a lot of the bigger CAFO farms that have gotten let's say special help from their friends in state government. So I'm not saying there's not a place for CAFOs, but again, I think at the end of the day, it gets down to an issue of local control. If local residents aren't comfortable having that big mega farm next door, they should have more of a say in that than they do right now. So, yeah, what else? I think we've been going on for just over an hour. I think we're gonna try do maybe one or two more quick questions and then kind of start to wrap things up. But this has just been tremendous.
Well, Mason, I've got one more question here as far as improving the availability of resources for those that need mental health, domestic abuse, addiction. It's kind of all wrapped up in here, and it's been in the news now since the whole COVID crisis, because people have had to stay home and they've really had to deal with issues that have been kind of very difficult. So what can we do to help with that mental health and domestic abuse and addiction problem?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a broad topic. I said before, I was glad that people are starting to value the public health again in this country and in this state. Mental health is obviously a huge component of that. I've unfortunately known too many people in my life who've been victims of suicide, and in every instance, I wish I had known more, and I wish I knew what they were dealing with in their lives, and I wish I'd been able to help before it was too late. There's a couple different things that the state can do in the short term that I think really would make a difference. One is I am on board with legalizing both medical and recreational marijuana. Medical marijuana can work to help reduce pain for people. It can help people dealing with chronic disease. Recreational marijuana, this might shock people. I've never smoked a single joint in my entire life. It's just never interested me, okay? But we know people are going to do it. The prohibition on marijuana hasn't worked. And now many of our residents are just driving across the border to Illinois, where they did legalize recreational marijuana. Illinois is collecting millions in tax revenue from our residents, and they're also getting money from their tolls from our residents that's helping pay for their roads. So it's kind of a double whammy. So I think we should legalize, regulate, and tax marijuana. And we can use that money for a couple of things. We can use it to help reduce property taxes. We can also use a portion of that money to help with mental illness treatment. We've seen what a chronic problem it is. We just talked about dairy farmers, and there's an epidemic with them, and just having a handful of vouchers to hand out every year, that doesn't cut it. We need to get really serious about addressing the mental health needs of our residents. And one thing we can do with that has been kind of on the table for a long time. Our friends in the majority party haven't supported it, but we can take the federal Medicaid expansion, and that getting that money returned, it's our tax money, getting it returned to our state, that will help address the mental health crisis tremendously. So, Steve, I think we kind of covered a lot of different things tonight. As we kind of move towards wrapping things up, is there anything you want to talk about? Things that the Jeff Dems have coming up, or just maybe things that you hope voters will look at as we head towards November?
Well, a couple things. Please stay tuned for announcements coming up. It's going to be a big event later in the month, music and speakers and that sort of thing. So we've got quite a little program scheduled for later in June, and that's going to be coming out on Facebook, and we'll do some e-blasts. But I would like to just close by saying, look, everybody, we need your support. Mason needs your support, and it's really critical that we get that to our candidates sooner rather than later, so that they can put those resources to work as efficiently as possible, because we're in this to win, and we need people on our side. We need our supporters to really step up and do what we can for Mason and the rest of the assembly candidates. So thank you very much. Mason, thanks very much.
Thanks, Steve. And I'm glad that as the chair of the Democratic Party of Jefferson County, you were able to join me tonight. Like I said, coming up later this month, I'm going to be doing similar virtual town halls with the other area county parties. So I'm really excited about that, because we're still not able to knock doors. Like I said, we're still not able to do the big meetings. So we're going virtual. One thing we talked about funding, but if we're going to keep getting our message out digitally, yes, it takes money. And I'm hoping if there's any year where, if you've never given to a candidate before, or maybe you haven't in a long time, you'll consider opening up the pocketbook and making a donation, because it does take money to win. We know my opponent is going to get help from an alphabet soup of PACs and conservative political organizations. I'm not getting that. I'm not going to get that. I keep hearing about this George Soros guy. Haven't gotten a check from him. It must have gotten lost in the mail. So I need contributions from individual donors, people like you who live in our communities in this area and can help me win in November. I just want to say in conclusion, this race is about values. What do we want this state to look like moving forward? We're all tired of the hyperpartisanship. We're tired of the bickering, and we're tired of legislators who don't listen to their constituents. I hope I'm giving you a good alternative. I know I'm getting support from people who consider themselves strong Democrats. I know I'm going to get help from some of the independents in the middle who are tired of the vitriol and the division that's happened in this country. To my Republican and conservative friends, I just want to say, I know a lot of you talk about wanting to get back to bipartisanship and cooperation. It's not going to happen if you keep voting for the same people in the same party over and over again. consider what's at stake in this country and consider what values we want to be putting forward as an example to our kids. So I just want to say this was great, Steve. I loved having you on, and I hope we'll be able to do this later again down the line. And in November, let's just make sure we return to results. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.